art, archetype, and ancient wisdom. I love this discussion. It's a big discussion. There's nothing superficial or just kind of skimming the surface about it. It dives deep and goes deep. So let's talk about those archetypes and what they are for a moment. Archetypes really are patterns of behavior. They're not psychological traits. They are those, I'll say, operating systems that we manage life on a day-to-day basis that we're not even aware of. And it's these patterns of behavior, a pattern being something that's predictable, count-onable, it repeats on itself. And it's that kind of repeatability that the pattern is all about. So if we don't know that we're operating by the pattern, we're just doing the same old, same old, same old, and without any availability of new, different, or more empowered, perhaps. So I really love looking at the archetypes as a way to explore myself and remembering that each archetype has both the shadow aspect and the light aspect. The shadow is not good, bad, or indifferent. The shadow is simply that which we're unaware of. That's the nature of a shadow. You don't know it's behind you. You can't see this shadow. So you don't know that you don't know. So our archetype du jour is the guide. And the guide actually thinks that she does know. In fact, she thinks she knows it all. So what comes to your mind when I say the word guide? And maybe some other kind of synonyms for guide with similar threads of thought would be crone or sage, wise woman, spiritual master, evangelist, preacher. They could all be kind of put in that same realm. Now, guide could be compared to others like a teacher, but the guide has a more spiritual element to it. So in fact, here is Carolyn Mace's from her deck of cards. This is the guide. So you can see a person with a light and then the owl. And what she has for the light attribute is it represents the nature of the divine in life and in yourself. And the shadow aspect places financial gain and control over imparting spiritual insight. So in the shadow, again, the guide might think that others have to follow her or him. The guide knows it all. The guide has to be out ahead. The guide has to be the leader. The guide doesn't have room for spontaneity. And the guide has been there, done that, and thinks that that's the only way to do anything. But in the light, the guide really has more wisdom than that. The guide is willing to be guided. And in fact, the guide has been out in front and has had others followed, but the guide has also been a follower. And then having experienced both sides of it, she knows that neither is the right or the wrong way, that they both have their places, and that it's important to have those places at varying times. But she is seen as a messenger of the divine. She doesn't have the overinflated ego that the guide in the shadow might have. And she doesn't think that she knows better than others when she's in the light. And my notes say that she can be a channel for sacred. She can be a channel for the life-changing guidance. And that's kind of how I see myself as a guide. I see that the guide is one of my primary archetypes when it comes to traditional real estate, which I work in that industry, but also in the industry of art and art making. So the guide for me is really looking at embodying that divine channel of information and being guided from a higher level. Can be intuition, can be sacred, can be God, can be divine. and what all of that means. So I like to create the archetypes into images, and this is one that I did. This is a soul collage card, and I've got geese. I like the fact that the geese is following on the draft of the one in front. The one in front is the guide, knowing which direction to head. And then compass, Native Americans, and light. So for me, I was always fascinated with Sacagawea. She's a great mentor for me in terms of guide, that she was a real pioneering spirit that brought people who had never traveled the distance and the length across the country and foraging through the great unknown to get to that West Coast, and the courage and the bravery and being willing to follow intuition and to harness knowledge from a higher source, I think is extremely powerful. So when I look at archetypes and marrying them with art, I'm trying to find the symbols and the icons and the graphics that can be used for that. So you saw on that card that I had light. The guide does carry the light of which others can travel by. There's map, there's compass, there are the star constellations, where the sun is in terms of setting and high noon and that sort of thing. And let's see, tour guide is a way that some people will look at guide. She's got her itinerary in the light, and the guide is willing to allow for times of unplannedness and to provide for synchronicity on the space, for spontaneity, rather than kind of having things all rigid and mapped out. So right now I'm working on moving my small card that you saw with a rendition that's in fabric and a much larger size. So I have included the same Native American. To me, that's really important to include that spirit. I've included the geese because I do think that has a real significant kind of driving force. And the way I'm trying to portray it is that these geese are flying over the vastness of canyon lands, and they're flying off into the rising sun and leaving behind them a night sky. So night sky with constellations, setting sun over the mountaintops, geese over the expansiveness of land that was created over thousands and thousands of years. There's that timelessness aspect of archetypes. And then, of course, the Native American. I'm really interested in this conversation, and if you are at all resonate with any of this and you would like, I am creating a once a month live monthly Zoom meetup meeting to talk about art and archetypes and how the making of the archetypes has an influence on us, as well as really coming to comprehend the extents of the archetypes within ourselves, and also how that then reflects in our art. So would love to have you participate. You can find the information below. I also have a newsletter and a blog as well. So I'm totally enchanted by this subject and would like to help guide you along the same kind of enthusiasm, exploration, and deep empowerment that is available. Thanks so much for being here. Don't forget to subscribe.